welcome back. My name is Jenna and I'm the producer for the Roxborough House Roundtables here at Jefferson East Falls. Today's discussion focuses on race and the law and how legal systems have both shaped and been shaped by racial inequality. We're joined by the race and law class who will guide today's conversation and connect. So now let's get started.
Sure, thank you so much. I am Professor Chris Neal and I teach the race and the law class. I want to first thank the Roxborough House for having us and those who coordinate, the roundtable. We're super excited to bring these topics to the forefront because I think now more than ever, race and the law is intersecting. So many of our laws are impacting so many racial demographics, and I think that it's about creating safe space to be able to talk about it. Even it's messy, it's controversial, and so we're going to have 3 topics today that we're going to talk about. Thank you so much, Professor Evan Lane, for also giving us the opportunity to have these discussions as well. So I'm going to dive right in with our first discussion. I'm going to bring out the first discussion. It's going to be centered around immigration. Surprise, surprise, right? And so with relation to immigration, the United States Supreme Court, if you haven't heard, just heard a case in April 1st, and no, it was not an April Fool's joke, but this was a case centered around birthright citizenship, the 14th Amendment. And let me give some background on what it is and what was happening, and then I want to open it up for some dialogue and discussion to see, what you all's thoughts are. So, by way of introduction, the 14th Amendment, it states all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. Now, historically, what this has meant is that people who are born into the United States are natural citizens and get the privileges, immunities, and rights that a citizen who's a natural citizen would have. The language under controversy in this case was the specific language of subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Remember that language, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So I'm going to read again the 14th Amendment, and then I'm going to tease out why this was so problematic or where the controversy lies, and then engage you all on what your thoughts are. So again, the 14th Amendment says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. So this sets up criteria for who gets to claim citizenship in the United States. Now, with this Supreme Court case on April 1st, on the one hand, the administration was arguing that language, subject to the jurisdiction, means that if you are living in the United States and you are subject to the rules and laws of the United States, meaning that you have already claimed citizenship, you have already claimed a right to the liberties and the privileges and the immunities and all the things about being a citizen, then this applies to you, then you are a citizen. However, the court took the opinion, and the historical precedent takes the opinion that subject to the jurisdiction means if you're on our land, you are subject to the jurisdiction. Whether or not you got a green card, whether or not you got a passport, whether or not, no matter what you have, the fact that you're on our land means that you are a citizen. So what this brings into question are people whose parents are not citizens, but they're born here. Right? Because according to the administration's argument, they will not be considered citizens because they come from unnaturalized, and I'm putting that in air quotes, unnaturalized citizens. And however, the jurisprudence around the 14th Amendment and its interpretation would make that person, the person who was born of unnaturalized people, would make that person a citizen because they're on our land. So does everybody understand the argument with this? And so I want to open it up. What say you? Listen, and I want to provide safe space, no matter what side you fall on. I think let's just open it up for just casual conversation. Based upon those arguments, what do you all think? Do you all think that citizens subject to that language applies only to parents who are people who are born to citizens, parents who are citizens, or does it apply to people who are born to non-citizens?
It makes absolutely no sense. Okay. Jurisdiction is a legal term.
Yeah.
Jurisdiction means that the court has the right to be in a court, and the court has authority over you. There's subject matter jurisdiction and there's individual jurisdiction. It just means the court has a right to, 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 born here, thus you are subject to the jurisdiction of the court. It makes absolutely no sense at all. What the Trump administration is trying to do is change the Constitution without using the Constitution. And I would, rare thing, but I would agree with Justice Roberts when he says that the Constitution is not to be interpreted because of the way you want it interpreted. It has to be interpreted the way it means. If you're born here, you're a citizen. That's it. All persons born here. Are they subject? Yes, because you're here. You're subject to the jurisdiction of the courts. That's it. So to me, it makes no sense at all. But on the other hand, I've seen other opinions by the Supreme Court that also don't make any sense. So I don't know what's going to happen, although I think from what I've read, this is going nowhere, especially since he walked out after 15 minutes. I thought even he was seeing his argument was going nowhere. I don't understand that argument. So like, I'm asking you to explain it to me. I know you're not making it, but you're giving it from them. If you're the individual born here, then you are subject to jurisdiction. Your parents are irrelevant. What is it? What do your parents have to do with it? I don't get it.
Yeah, I think that the argument is that the parents have everything to do with it, because if your parents are not subject to this jurisdiction, and the scope of subject to this jurisdiction means that you are subject to the laws, that you not only have to adhere to the laws, but also you get to enjoy when you obey the laws. You get to get benefits. And the fact that if you're not a citizen and you don't get the privileges of being a citizen, then you're not within the jurisdiction. And so that then any person that comes from you through lineage then also does not enjoy those benefits and therefore are not a citizen. That's the argument.
But people in the United States, whether you're a citizen or not, are protected by the Constitution.
That's
so that argument falls apart.
Yeah.
And I still don't understand. It says all persons born here. It doesn't say whose parents are subject. It refers to them who are subject. So any reading, whether you're originalist or whatever, it's referring to the person born. And if they're here, they're subject to jurisdiction. There's no argument. I can't see the argument there. So I throw it to the other. What do you guys think? I don't see it, but maybe you do.
Well, I think that's why Trump was so desperate to even climb those steps to the Supreme Court. Like, well, I think he's like the first sitting president to do that. And he's so desperate to have his argument heard, he tried intimidating the Supreme Courts by being there. And I mean, I feel like this case has already been ruled on. I think it was U.S. v. Wong Kim Ark. I mean, it's been tested before, birthright citizenship, and I think the president has said a while back, and 1900s should remain so.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think a related question, no matter which way you slice and dice how to interpret this language subject to the jurisdiction, I think there's something to be said that there's already precedent on this, right? The reason why we have the precedent and why we call it precedent is because we hope that it sets the rule for how to move forward. And, absent some exigent, extreme circumstance, then if it's not broken, then let's continue on with the law. So I think a related question is that, are we ready to deviate from the precedent that's already been established? Like Professor Lane said, if you're born, the precedent says if you're born here, you're a citizen. And what this case could potentially do is veer itself from a long line of, and make invalid a long line of historical legal precedent.
Take a look at the genesis of it. It was to make slaves American citizens, right? I would venture to say that most of the parents of the slaves were not American citizens. I think I make a good guess on that. Or weren't born in the United States, were most likely born in Africa. So it was, when it was passed, it directly made what we're talking about right now. So when you're looking at precedent and meaning, all of it is on the side of the argument I'm making now, and none of it is on the side of what the parents are, because if it was, none of those slaves, I guarantee you, would have become citizens, which they all became. That was the whole point of that. So it's the most bogus argument from an attorney's point of view. It's laughable. But again, does that matter?
Does precedent matter?
It should. That's why it's called privilege.
Clarence Thomas says it doesn't matter.
What happens when it doesn't matter?
Everything falls apart.
What do you mean by everything?
Like the structures that are already set in place to protect us. So, I mean, we already know what what the president's wants to do is through his vision of what he doesn't like. So he wants to take and take and take. And through immigrants, he has I don't know what he feels towards them, but we can see that it's very something that like deep-hearted, that he even wants to go towards U.S. citizens from those immigrants. And so with precedent, he obviously doesn't care about precedent. So.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you're bringing up this opinion. You actually anticipated my next question, so I'm going to pose it to you, but please, anyone else, feel free to answer. Is that, like, is this really about the interpretation of the 14th Amendment? Is that what this really is about? Like, is there some hidden agenda here? And who is the demographic that is really getting impacted by this, and particularly in a negative way? Because I think that answer allows us to see the relationship between race and the law. So any hidden agendas, or maybe not even hidden, but any other agendas beyond, let's do this mental exercise of interpreting the Constitution?
I think that, sorry, you can go ahead.
I was going to say, I think with him formally assigning Greg Bovino to the position of border czar, given that it's been proven that he's an anti-Semite and he also proudly wears the overcoat that former Nazi officers used to wear, I would argue that it definitely is more so about race rather than, questioning the 14th Amendment.
And what would you say are the racial implications?
In what context?
In the context of interpreting immigration policy in this way, interpreting it to limit the scope illegally of what citizenship is. What are the racial implications of it? If race is like the undertone, are there certain demographics who get impacted and how?
I mean, maybe one example of that would be him, for example, talking about Somalia, calling it a, quote, shithole country, and all the other comments he's made. I think that could definitely be one example of it so far.
He gets to decide who gets to be an American citizen or not.
Which I think leads to this egregious autonomy of interpreting the Constitution separate from precedent. Then you get this, like, control of who gets to be in and be out according to what your standard is, and not based upon what the legal standard is. That's what I take you to say at that point.
Yeah.
If we don't rely on precedent, we have no law. Because the law is whatever you want to make it for the moment. And the Constitution is supposed to set, this is the playbook, this is the way we've agreed as a society to operate. And if we don't rely on our previous decisions on it, then everything's up in the rivers.
Yeah. Because then I guess the executive branch begins to interpret the laws, that's not the structure of our government. I want to throw this last piece out, and then we can move on to another topic. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson had made a really great practical point of, okay, if we tease out this idea of if you're born of an unnaturalized person, then practically speaking, when the person is born, how do we know that the mother, the father, whoever the parents are, and however they identify, are actually unnaturalized? And she brought up, so does this mean that we then are taking depositions of pregnant women to figure out right before birth, to figure out, hey, when did you get here? How long have you been here? Did you fill out any paperwork? Is that the practical implications? When this moves to like the Department of Justice, who has to then execute this new interpretation, then it's interesting to see kind of what that looks like practically. What do you all say about then the practical implications and the downward stream effects, particularly for women who are in labor, for children who are born who don't know who their parents are, right? What do you all think about just the practicality of interpreting the law in this egregious way?
How about an adoption situation?
Yeah.
You know, there's many babies who were adopted who are going to go chase down the mother, the father.
Yeah.
Like, so a lot of times they want to be anonymous, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
How are we going to know this?
Yeah.
We know when they're born. They're born here is a record, except when it's Obama, because he was born in Kenya, right? And then it's just a little joke. She rushed over in an airplane, 16 hours, gave birth in Kenya, and then came back here. But other than that, you know, how are we going to, that was sarcastic, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just, yes, Obama is from Kenya. That's impossible to know, but she's right, Judge Brown. How are we going to know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the Obama thing that we talked about, but also I was gonna say, like, how do we know anyone who's a citizen then anymore? Because like years ago when like immigrants came, if you're basing it on your parents, then what about like your parents' parents? And then are like, if your grandparents were immigrants, then are you a citizen now? Or like, how do we decide anymore?
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that earlier. I feel like that argument pretty much undermines the idea that, like, or it supports the idea that pretty much nobody in this country is a citizen. We all came from immigrants.
Not all.
Except the Native Americans.
Except the Native Americans.
But like, the idea is that the country was founded on immigration, and again, I think that supports the idea that basically nobody is a citizen.
Mm-hmm. Which goes back to, I think, your point earlier of like, the 14th Amendment contemplated, you know, being born. The reason why was to contemplate what you're saying of, look, nobody has ownership of this land except Native Americans. And the reason why we put this 14th Amendment in place is to be able to say, hey, you too can be a citizen, even though not only you, but your lineage did not start here. I appreciate, thank you so much for this discussion. This was really helpful and insightful. I'm going to pass the microphone over to our other presenter, Kavi, who's going to tell us a little bit about the SAVE Act.
All right, cool. Thank you so much. Like Professor Neal said, my name is Kavi. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the SAVE Act, which is also very topical, and how it is a pretty egregious attempt to attack minority voting rights. So first, let's get a quick show of hands. Who here has heard of the SAVE Act or is pretty familiar with it? Cool, that's most of us, that's all of us actually. So as you do know, the SAVE Act was passed through the U.S. House of Representatives on February 11th, but it is currently being filibustered in the Senate and hopes that it won't pass, obviously. As you already kind of have figured out, this bill would require Americans to present documentary proof of citizenship, namely a passport or a birth certificate in person when registering to vote, updating registration, as well as actually showing up to vote on election day. This piece of legislation was introduced in Texas to ensure that non-citizens don't vote, which I think you can all kind of tell that this is an extremely rare occurrence because it's already illegal. Like it's a requirement for that you're a citizen to vote. That is a prerequisite. There's a threat of penalty of perjury if non-citizens do vote. There's no evidence that this has actually happened to the extent that like the rhetoric kind of suggests. And on that point of rhetoric, there's been several quotes in the media and the press about this act and how much people want it to pass like on a certain side of the aisle. For example, in February, the Secretary of Homeland Security said, when it gets to election day, we've been proactive to make sure we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to this country, and it's very clear what he means by right, or at least the implication. President Trump said that he wants to nationalize elections to stop illegal aliens and other unpermitted persons from voting in our sacred American elections. There's been other such claims made to this effect that are very steeped in anti-immigrant rhetoric and kind of the Great Replacement theory as well. And beyond the public sentiment, there's also like the practical effects that this bill could have if it was passed. So for example, like I said, documentary proof of citizenship has to be presented in person, right? So tribal IDs that Native Americans have in reservations wouldn't be acceptable to vote. And this is simultaneously while indigenous people are less likely to own birth certificates due to having higher rates of home births as opposed to hospital births. Mail-in voting and like public community-based voter registration drives would essentially be upended. And because you're not usually carrying a passport with you when you're at a voter registration drive at a hospital or a school or anything. So those kind of would be extremely onerous to conduct. And it's also worth noting that mail-in voting and voter registration drives are both avenues that like Black, Asian, Latino people utilize at higher rates than their white counterparts. And in terms of the documentation itself, there is so much research out there about how, 2/3 of Black Americans as well as 3/5 of Latinos lack a valid passport and are often priced out of getting or replacing one if they lost it or if they change their name upon marriage or whatever it is, because depending on the state, because there's no one set price, this cost of getting that documentary proof of citizenship can be anywhere from $65 to $195, like depending on what state you're in. Some people have to travel very long distances to even get to an election office or a DMV, depending on the rurality of their of like where they live. And so with some of this background information in mind, I want to kind of open it up to you guys to hear your thoughts about the SAVE Act and its implications. So I guess I'll start just like, what do you think overall of like how this piece of legislation would impact minority voters if it was passed?
Yep. I would like to start and say it would lessen them to vote, which I know that's what they're hoping for. I know a majority, especially immigrants, they have a lot of trouble getting passports, real IDs, things of that nature that show like who they are, which is purposeful. So for them to add in the fact that, you need this documentation in order to vote, only allows them to play out what they want. They want people of white descent, European descent to vote for the things that they want because they know that the minority groups are going to vote for things against what they want.
I feel like it's also not practical. Like I don't know anyone that carries their passport, and my parents hold my passport, so I don't even know where it is. And also like sometimes I forget my ID, and I know it's bad, but like I feel like it's really unsafe too. Like, and you're just out there and you would be scared like if someone stops you and they're like, where's your document? Even though you're a citizen, and even if you're not.
I had never thought about that. I'm so glad that you said that. I never thought about like, I think there's something to be said about assuming that everybody is an upstander, and the fact that since not everybody's an upstander, I was a criminal defense lawyer. And so I think this is why it resonates with me so much, is because it might even heighten criminality to the extent that if I know that you have some documentation on you that is personal, then that might incentivize, criminal behavior.
Yeah, and speaking of the criminality, part of this, the text of the legislation is also that election workers who do allow, voters on election day to vote, even if they don't have their documentary proof of citizenship on them, they'll get penalized for it. So that really, there's the criminality on both sides, from the election workers who are trying to like, you know, do a good deed on election day, like let people vote. Like it's like, I've seen you last year, you voted then, I trust that you're a citizen, because again, there are so many, there's like a whole retributive mechanism if non-citizens do vote, which already like does not happen. And so they're just like reversing that and like putting the onus on us Americans rather than the onus on the government to verify citizenship before people go out to vote. Nate, were you about to say something?
I was just going to say, you mentioned that, for example, Native Americans have to pay $65 to $190 to, what was it, to acquire?
To acquire a birth certificate.
Right, so I think essentially that's just a poll tax.
Yeah.
And you know, $65 to $190, unfortunately some people can't afford that, especially at like one given time.
This is a law that has no purpose other than to be discriminatory. There's no problem. Studies done by right-wing organizations such as the Heritage Foundation has found that non-citizens voting accounts for 0.01 of the total votes. That's nothing. It's not a problem. So we're passing a law that's addressing something that's not a problem. So we have to say, then what is the point? If it's not addressing the problem, what is it doing? What is it doing is throwing raw meat to the base. And saying that we're going to keep all those migrants who are legal, millions of voting, you said, millions of voting, you said. I think they found 79 through the whole country, which is a little different than millions.
I think it was actually 77, but
77,
yeah, literally like
yeah.
so few.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's, but he says millions, they hear millions, and they react. And what it does, it just makes them happy. It's the raw meat situation. The same thing with transgender athletes. I think they found one transgender athlete in all of Olympic history, but we're all screaming and yelling like this is a huge problem, which it isn't, but it's, when you focus on something that isn't a problem, there's another reason for it. Again, it's to stimulate people, it's to get the base all riled up, it's a manipulation, it's a con job, and I just wish this country would stop being so easily conned. But we are, and the SAVE Act is unnecessary, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of time us discussing it or anyone discussing it because there's no need for it. I'd like to see some discussion on maybe some infrastructure bills or maybe funding cancer research, something that really matters other than this nonsense, but this is where we're at now.
Or at least if it's within the scope of voting, you know, helping people get more access.
That would be nice.
Rather than limiting it, yeah, what a thought, yeah. What a concept. Yeah, and like another question that I kind of had for you guys is like about your personal voting experiences. So like, do you vote like in person, mail-in, absentee if you're out of state, and like why you vote the way you do, and like related to that, like the barriers that would be imposed if through like mail-in voting and like other ways of voting upon this act being passed if it goes through the Senate.
I'm from Washington, and I never had to apply to vote or anything like in Pennsylvania. It was crazy filling out the application for me, and there's also like a mail-in. You have to also apply for a mail-in ballot too in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. I had no concept of that because they just in Washington they just send you the ballot and say vote. I mean, at least you get a sticker if you go in person in Pennsylvania. So,
yeah.
So I feel like. I mean, earlier I wanted to mention too, as part of this, Steve Bannon has openly said, mm-hmm. I want to put ICE agents outside of polling stations. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So does that mean like for people in Washington, right, who primarily mail in the ballot or drop off their ballot inside of a ballot collection box, does that mean ICE agents are gonna be outside of those boxes to stop people from dropping off their ballots first? Or this is a blatant attack on democracy, the SAVE Act.
Well, it's an intimidation because if you're of color or Latino and you are a citizen and you're going to vote and you see an ICE agent out there knowing that American citizens have been attacked, killed, imprisoned, You may say, you know what, I'm a citizen, I've got my passport, but these ICE agents, they're out there, they have beat up people, American citizens.
Drag them out of their car. As you're
Maybe I
driving up to drop
don't go vote because I'm afraid. It's all about intimidation. Why are they there? Prevent the 0.01 people who vote? No, they're there to intimidate. There's no question about it.
That's a good
It worked out.
I think as the child of two immigrants, it only incentivized me to vote even more. Like, it's not gonna make me not want to vote. Like, you're trying to create these barriers. I'm a U.S. citizen, so I'm gonna go vote and do my right to vote. And that's all I really wanted to say.
Did you know people that might be intimidated and not go out and vote? Did you see that?
I feel like it also provoked the younger generation to violence, because having ICE agents and seeing on the news how violent people can get regarding how violent ICE agents can get, and having them in polling areas, I feel like it would just create a lot of violence.
And another question that I had was about have any of you guys participated in community-based voter registration drives, either registered that way or volunteered in these community-based civics efforts? And what are your thoughts on those potentially being kind of eradicated under the requirements of in-person proof of citizenship?
I mean, I've participated in some from our APIPA, or the Asian Civic Islander Political Alliance in Philadelphia. I mean, it's just you have a booth where sometimes I walk around with a clipboard with forms on it, but I prefer sitting. So I'm usually at the booth, sitting down, helping people register, helping them fill it out. And it's just even if they just walk past and ignore you, I think it's having the ability to help people who do want to get registered to vote, or maybe they just haven't considered it before. It's a great resource, a great way to help community members, especially Asian community members who might not, who might struggle with English, right? I am there because I speak a little bit of Vietnamese. And having that, those voting registration taken away from, especially in endangered communities like Asians would be be bad.
And yeah, last question is just about, in terms of the future of civic engagement more generally. This is actually kind of related to what you were saying about provoking young people. How do you think this will affect young people in particular, and the future? Because as we know too, there is this huge gap in the Gen Z voting block. A lesser percentage of our block of voters is registered compared to older people. So I'm wondering what you guys think about what the generational disparities might be under the SAVE Act.
Low political efficacy. It's the idea that you can affect the politics, but now it's not only low, it's also a sense that I could get jailed or arrested and hauled off to God knows where, and sent to God knows where, It's just, it's not only, I don't believe I can make any change, I also could get beat up or arrested for trying to make change too.
Also, acknowledgement. I feel high school should talk more about voting and that you have to register and the steps to register, because my high school didn't really talk about us needing to register, so I didn't know, and I turned 19 in high school, so I was a bit behind. So I feel there's a lot of the younger generation that doesn't know the process to having to needing to vote.
Yeah, because how much of geometry are you using today?
Exactly. None.
Well, yeah, that was pretty much all of my questions. It was really nice to hear all of your insights on the burden that this act would impose if it was passed, and how kind of scary the thought of it even is. Hopefully, the Senate will kill it, because previous kind of copycat versions of this act have been thrown out before, and they haven't come to fruition. So we can only kind of hold on to that hope that something similar will happen again. But yeah, thank you all for all of your thoughts and opinions. And with that, I will pass it over to Lena for our last topic.
Hi, my name is Lena, and my topic is about a failing system that violates the U.S. Constitution and causes racial disparities. And I think that might be a bold claim, but I think it follows the past two discussions nicely, because it draws into question the laws, but also how the people are applying the laws. So the American criminal justice system is intended to uphold fairness and equality under the law, but data suggests that is not always the reality, particularly for African American defendants. One major issue is cross-racial identification, where eyewitnesses are more likely to misidentify individuals of a different race, and studies show that about 60% of wrongful convictions involving misidentification includes cross-racial errors. Jury composition is another concern. Research from Duke University found that all white juries convict black defendants approximately 16% more often than juries that include at least one black juror. Additionally, prosecutors can use peremptory challenges during jury selection to exclude jurors without clear justification, which has historically been used to disproportionately remove black jurors. Beyond the courtroom, the disparities continue. African Americans make up a significantly larger percentage of incarcerated population compared to white individuals. Factors such as racial profiling, unequal access to quality legal representation, and biased bail decisions all contribute to this imbalance. So the issue is whether systemic failures result in violation of African Americans defendants' constitutional rights under the 5th, 6th, 8th, and 14th Amendments. So the first part is the 5th and 14th Amendments guarantee due process and equal protection under the law. While cross-racial misidentification leads to wrongful convictions, these constitutional protections are undermined. If a defendant is identified incorrectly due to known psychological biases, it raises the question whether the legal process is truly fair or reliable. So I'm going to open it up to you if you guys have ever heard of cross-racial identification before this discussion, or ever considered it to be a problem in the past, because if we on the ground level don't even know much about it, then how can we expect lawyers and judges to rule fairly?
I've heard of it in my crime and justice class, where we talked about how easy it is for victims to say someone did it when it wasn't the person, just because they have same features.
Has anybody else heard of it?
I think also with how people perceive African Americans as looking alike, so it also challenges if this person didn't do it, you're upholding them to getting jailed because they look like someone who did commit the crime. It's they're not correctly, or sometimes they don't even care enough to say this isn't the person who committed this crime, but this is all we got. So
yeah, and I think that in addition, yes, I have heard of the phrase, given my work in as a criminal defense lawyer. This came up quite frequently, and to your point about not caring and not knowing, I'm glad that you elevated that, because I think an additional layer is that not only is there a belief, a false belief that black people look alike, but then there's this value that is assigned to that demographic, to black people, that is negative. So it's not oh, you all look like each other. You all are just so cheerful and lovely, and we would love to be around you all the time, right? That would be, I'm okay, good. I'm glad that we all look alike. Right. It's more and you're armed and you're dangerous, and the next thing that we want is for you to be on, you're just a risk to society. So I think that that assigning of a particular value really undergirds the racism of the cross-racial, cross-cultural identification.
The Supreme Court in Karamazov, which was the Supreme Court case dealing with internment, the argument made by the prosecution, accepted by Judge Black in his opinion, was how do you tell the difference between a good Japanese citizen and a bad one, because, in quotes, they all look alike. And that was accepted by the court. So if you want to look...
Whenever there's a national security argument.
Yeah, they all look alike. So that was accepted as an argument in the Supreme Court of the United States to justify Japanese internment. So when you're saying it doesn't exist in our legal system, yes, and recognized as a defense of the government that, yes, I can arrest people because they all look alike. Crazy.
Even to like, we already know like the Central Park 5, like that in itself, to pick up kids who didn't fit, who actually committed this crime when it was one person, you picked up 5 children, because the woman, which I can't say, I can't blame her because her experiences shaped like what she thought in her tragic moment. But obviously the detectives and members who worked that case didn't do a lot to protect those kids given their background and where they grew up. So it's also like they don't, like I said previously, they don't care enough to say like these are not the suspects who committed this crime.
And I think that from a lawyer's perspective, and speaking very practically of how this plays out in the courtroom, is that as a criminal defense attorney, when I find out that there is a cross-racial, cross-cultural, I would like to think that I'm empowered to say something, to say, hey, judge, hey, court, I would like to bring up a point of error here that for the court's consideration. Particularly this comes up with the need for a lineup or a need for a photo identification or maybe to do it again. And I don't think that many lawyers, particularly criminal defense lawyers, are empowered to bring that up as a reason to move differently and in a different, move the case in a different direction. And because of, sentiments around whether or not it's true or whether or not it happens or whether or not it's relevant. And so I think that there's another fail in judges being educated, the people who need to know about it most, and the lawyers being empowered to say, I think we have an issue, a constitutional issue here.
And that follows into like my next question about like safeguards that can be put in place, especially for things like that, and especially during lineups. I think it's important for the people that are doing the lineups and like the police to also be educated about this. And because if, like, say they know who the suspect is and then the person doesn't, and there's like a lineup and say it's like 5 black people and they point out one person and then the police officer gives them some sort of indication that they might be right, but they weren't actually right, that also contributes to this misidentification. So are there any other safeguards, do you think, that can be put into place to like prevent some of this?
I think it's important to note to a victim that the perpetrator is not necessarily in the lineup, because Professor Lane, we talked about in the crime and justice class, victims who go into a lineup, they automatically assume that the person who did it must be there, otherwise they wouldn't have called them to the lineup in the first place. So I think part of that, like a safeguard, is, it's crucial to mention that the person may or may not be there.
I mean, lawyers have to take continuing legal education courses, classes, in order to maintain their license. And so it might be effective to have more continuing legal education classes for people who sign up for this line of work as a point of accountability and awareness.
And moving further, do we think that in like the day and age of like artificial intelligence programs and algorithms are contributing more to the misidentification, or it's the people that are using the programs that are putting their own bias into the AI?
Are you talking about with bail, with sentencing, or with idea of the defendant? Which one are all 3?
mostly all three, but I'm gonna get into bail later, but mostly like racial profiling of the defendant.
The problem with AI is garbage in, garbage out. And if you're relying on years of prejudicial opinions, prejudicial findings that AI is going to pull up because they don't know it's prejudicial, it's just statistical, that's only going to lead to further prejudice.
And then so moving on to jury selection and the right to a fair trial. The Sixth Amendment guarantees the right to an impartial jury, and the 14th Amendment ensures equal protection. However, during voir dire, the jury selection process, particularly through peremptory challenges, can be manipulated in ways that exclude jurors based on race. Prosecutors may use these challenges to exclude jurors without providing a clear justification because they do not have to explain the reason for removal. For example, in the trial of Curtis Flowers, the prosecutor used all of his peremptory challenges to exclude black jurors. Cases like Strouder v. West Virginia established that racial inclusion from juries violates the Constitution, yet similar patterns still occur today in more subtle forms. When juries are not representative or impartial, the fairness of the entire trial is called into question. So do we think that the current jury selection process is fair and that impartial juries more often, or result in fair and impartial juries more often than not? Because if it's supposed to be a jury of your peers, do you think that would be reflected accurately?
I don't think that jury selection is impartial or like separate from bias. They like to say that it is, but it isn't. Like, you can't walk into a courtroom and they say like you're completely not, like, can't be biased. You have to like listen to the case. You can't throw out your previous experiences and say like this is what I'm going to like base everything off of. So with that, if you have an all-white jury and they're hearing a case about maybe like a black man or black woman, they're not gonna be unbiased. Like, it's just what we've seen with what you even mentioned about the prosecutor pulling out people. They're only doing it to further up their own agenda and what's going to work best for them.
Yeah, and I think that it becomes really egregious when that basis, that agenda is race-based. Mm-hmm. I remember in the George Floyd case, the defense attorney during voir dire, he had a line of questioning that asked questions about potential jurors, their participation in protests, and said, have you been marching? Have you attended Black Lives Matter? Did you carry a sign? What did your sign say? You know, and that line of questioning was very off-putting to the extent that it was almost like punishing someone to fulfill a civic duty because of their alignment or their allyship with a race.
So in the interest of
I just
time,
wanted to add on to that. I think in a sense, like, it can be argued that that type of questioning can be used to prevent bias, but as we all know, ultimately it is about racism and, you know, trying to discriminate against people.
Absolutely, definitely fine line, because the bias is on both ends. Thank you for elevating that.
yeah, thank you for saying that. So in the interest of time, I really would like to talk about bail because I think that's a major point in this whole thing. The Eighth Amendment prohibits excessive bail, and while the Sixth Amendment guarantees the right to a speedy trial, studies indicate that people of color are more likely to be denied bail or assigned higher bail amounts than white defendants. And one of the solutions that I found was a system that has standardized or set bails, but there's also research that shows that that would actually hurt these individuals, especially with low income, because rich people would be able to buy their way out. So do you think that there is a way to, like, does the current bail system prioritize public safety and financial ability, or is it actually hurting people more often than not?
I think we should eliminate bail completely, except for extremely dangerous individuals. Other than that, we have ways of tracking people these days. or putting in people who have not been convicted into jail for significant periods of time, especially lower level crimes as well, because a lot of times the bail companies won't even give bail or give bonds on a small amount because it's not worth their time. So you have people serving for crime they may or may not have committed, which may be minor, 8, 9, 10 months in jail because they don't have money. So what it is, your crime is being poor. We should eliminate it completely, but we're not going to eliminate it completely because it makes a lot of money for our corporations, and it's supported by major corporations through unlimited money they give to candidates thanks to Citizens United. So my saying let's get rid of it is a fantasy. There's no way it's disappearing. If I want to take out a loan at a bank now, I think there's usury laws that prevent, was it 4 or 5% that can charge me? But they can charge 15, 20% on a loan. So that's a pretty good deal that these corporations are getting. They're able to charge usury interest on loans that they're giving out. So it's not going to disappear, but it should.
I agree that abolishing cash bail is the only way, because even, within our city, like Larry Krasner in 2018 stopped seeking cash bail for I think 24 misdemeanors and minor offenses, but we see the same disparities in our pretrial detention rates, right? Because like you were just saying, black and brown people are more likely to receive higher bail amounts that are of the ones that aren't covered within his policy, right? So it's kind of just maintaining the same system and keeping it chugging along by having this superficial kind of fake intervention. I agree completely that abolishing it is the only way to actually stop criminalizing poverty,
Yeah, and also because people can't afford bail, sometimes it can pressure them into accepting plea deals even if they're guilty or not. So I think that keeps people in jail more often. And so all of these issues, misidentification, biased jury, unequal bail, it raises a central question. Is it the system that's inherently bad, or is it how it's applied and how the people in the system are applying the constitutional laws?
There's purpose to it. It's not coincidental. And I told the class, I've given this quote many times from Nixon's right-hand man, just telling about his policies, but these laws were put in order to destroy lower-class communities and to destroy younger people because they don't vote a certain way. So they're intentional. It's not accidental.
I think what you said about getting rid of bail is not realistic. I think that there's a system, because without a system it would be anarchy and there would be no laws and but I think the way that the laws are being applied within the system are bad, and I think there's a lot more that could be done that might not be able to be done because the people aren't willing to make the change. Are there any final comments or questions?
All right, so thank you everyone for giving Race in the Law class this opportunity to talk about some really important topics, and we hope you all enjoyed.
Thank you for coming to the Roxborough House Roundtable. Today's conversation shows how important it is to keep examining the relationship between race and the law and what justice really looks like in practice. Thank you all for being here.